All right, Stephen Tigg, welcome to the podcast, mate. How are you?
I'm very well, Brett. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Where are you coming from?
At the minute, I'm coming from sunny Stirling in the heart of Scotland, which, for people that don't know, is in Great Britain.
Sunny Scotland. Not many people put it that way, but yeah, we'll call it sunny today for sure.
It's a bit of a rarity, aye. So it's good day.
I'm glad you said Great Britain because I want to get something off my chest. I want to figure this out, okay? Because I'm as confused as anybody. Okay, you're from Scotland, which is its own country, is it not?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So why do you then represent Great Britain at the Olympic Games? Like at the Commonwealth Games, you compete England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales separately, but then at the Olympics, you're together, correct?
Yeah, and to be fair, it's probably a question that's above my jurisdiction, and I don't really know the answer. But yeah, when we're at any international meet out with the Commonwealth Games, we represent Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as opposed to the four home nations. And I guess if you just think about it as it's effectively it's like separate states, but then they come together as one. So instead of having 50 odd like you do in the US or even over in Australia with the different states, and there's the main part, which is the United Kingdom, and we compete together as that at the major international meets.
I can understand that for sure, but you're also a proud Scot. I mean, you're proud of your own nation. So is there some sort of feelings when you guys get together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a proud Scot, but I'm also really proud to be part of Great Britain. And it gives you a lot of pride when you compete at the Olympic Games as part of the British team. There's a long history and heritage there, and when we go to the Commonwealth Games, obviously we can compete as Scotland, and that's quite unique once every 4 years. So you almost get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about you, mate. I'm going to switch back and forward between those views, by the way. I forgot to mention that. I like to see you up close.
I thought I'd lost you.
No, I always forget to tell people, and they're like, "Shit, what happened?" But I'm still there. I'm listening. But I like to see you up close. But yeah, just tell us about you, mate. Tell a little bit about your background. I mean, we're over in the States, so we kind of hear about all the American coaches. We don't get enough chance to really get to know the foreign coaches. So give us a little bit about you, mate.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm based at a university, which I guess is fairly similar to a college without the same sort of structure and setup. So I've coached. I'd still consider myself to be pretty novice and quite young. I've been coaching now for 15 to 16 years, and started like anybody, just as a volunteer at a local club, and very slowly worked my way through the club system and then into the university or college system, as you like to call it, and through the national pathway as well with the national teams both in Scotland and in Great Britain. So I've been based at Stirling now for 7 years, since just after the Commonwealth Games in 2014. I started here, so it's been quite a while now. And before that, I was just in age group development programs, working with the younger kids, and then I transitioned through and got the opportunity to work with senior athletes, and it's one that I just wanted to take. So I've been really fortunate, and still consider myself to be really fortunate in the position that I'm in, and I really enjoy it.
Well, you did brush over a couple of points. You're one of the best coaches in the world. You coach some of the best athletes in the world. You're also just recently you were the head coach of the London Raw, the ISL. So you're doing fantastic things in the world of high performance as well. But did you swim yourself?
I did, yeah. I wasn't very good, and I actually swam here in Stirling. And I was coached by an American coach at one point, Chris Martin, who was based over in Florida, and he was head of our institute for a few years. So I've always been based in Stirling, and I'm fortunate enough now to be able to do a job that I really enjoy with some really world-class athletes at home. So it's great.
So what's the association with the university there? How does it work for you?
It's a partnership between the governing bodies, both British Swimming, Scottish Swimming, and the university. And they just combine resources effectively to permit us to be able to run a performance program, because, as we all know, they're very costly. So, we've got really strong links. We've got excellent facilities and resources that are supplied by the university themselves. And then a lot of the funding comes from both British swimming and Scottish swimming through the UK sport network here in the Great Britain.
So the athletes that are within your realm under your program, they don't actually have to be studying at the university, do they?
Nah. Say it's about 50-50. Some of them do study part-time. Others will be full-time athletes. The majority of them maybe come in as students. Once they graduate, they'll just stop studying, and at that point they'll just become full-time. So there are some perks to being a student as well, particularly for some of the ones that aren't as established, and they can get some funding, some access to service provision that maybe isn't provided through the governing bodies because they're not eligible. So we have a lot of different plates that we try and spin at the same time.
So how do they survive then? Like, an athlete wants to come and swim with you in your program. Where do they live? How do they get food? How do they pay for traveling costs, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, they can get scholarships from the university and from us. And a lot of the athletes that come are on what we call APA support from the governing body. So they will pick up money through different levels of support provided by either British swimming or Scottish swimming. And then they just use that. And also, as they get a little bit further up the chain, they get prize money that they can rely on, or sponsorship. So some of the athletes that are maybe not as established and are in some of the development squads, they, like anybody else, they rely on maybe a little bit of part-time work and their parents to help them. But that's where we try and put a little bit of support around them, just either financially or otherwise, to make sure that they can still get a really positive experience.
Mate, I was lucky enough to sit and have a beer or two with you over in Eindhoven at the ISL final, and we were chatting, and you said you'd mentioned that you had been coaching Duncan Scott since he was a kid. How long's that been going on for?
I think I started coaching Duncan in 2005. So 16, coming on 16 years, I would say.
Wow.
And that was just by chance as well. I'd started volunteering at a local club, and I think on my second week, there was some kids getting a trial. Duncan and his sister were two of them, and that's kind of where that journey started. So.
Wow, that's crazy. He only looks like he's 16 now, so it looks like you've been coaching him since birth. Sorry, Duncan, I'm only kidding, mate. Now, I've got to be honest with you. Like, I always get them confused. All right, here's the three guys I get confused, and I'll explain why. Okay, Duncan Scott, James Guy, and Tom Dean. All right, I always get them confused. You know why I get them confused?
Why's that?
Because they've got two first names, Duncan and Scott, James and Guy, and Tom and Dean. How am I supposed to get these guys figured out when they've got two first names?
Yeah, you can switch them around the other way as well.
Yeah, exactly. Mix them up. No, they're all good guys, but that's a good group. Hey, you got a real good group in Great Britain right now. Good bunch of guys going.
Yeah, it's excellent, and that competition really just produces that bottleneck. And after our trials, we were really, really excited about the 200 freestyle and particularly the 4x2 going into the games. And you never ever want to underestimate anyone, and we knew it would be really difficult. And Joe Fink, who's gone back to Australia, led the 4x2 for Great Britain for a lot of years, and I've been fortunate to have other athletes apart from Duncan go on that journey too. I mean, we had a boy, Cameron Curl, who went 146.6 that didn't get on our Olympic team for the 4x2. So we knew that we had a lot of depth, and they really they've got a lot of humility about them. Those boys are really humble, and they always want to improve, and they always listen, and they're really good friends as well, which maybe helps. I couldn't be sure, but they get on really well together. I'm sure when they're eyeballing one another going down the back 50, they're pretty competitive, but yeah, it's a good group. And
it seems like they've figured it out, especially to win that gold in Tokyo in the 4x2. It seems like they'd come together way before that, and said to each other as a group, Like we're going to win this thing. We're aiming for this thing. Is that something collectively as a coaching staff you guys had come together as well?
Yeah, I think we'd a big change after London with Chris Spice coming in and Bill Furness, and they really raised the standard. Our teams got a lot smaller on the international stage. In order to get on the team, you had to be a lot faster, and it really drove up the standard. And to be honest, having somebody like Adam in the team, who's so dominant and his presence really brings out a confidence in everybody else when we're in the arena, helps. And I know that the athletes I work with, will not try and simulate him, but we'll look at some of his strengths and see where that can fit into their own type of character, particularly with that confidence and belief. And if you're on the British team now, there's always a chance that you could, as a minimum, make a final at an international meet. And if all things go well, there's the opportunity there to win medals.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, actually. I love the way that Peaty has figured out his competitiveness and the way he implements it into his racing mentality. That can sometimes come off as kind of a little bit bullyish, a little bit domineering, but it doesn't seem to be the case with him and the guys around him. The guys around him, like you said, and have kind of feeding off him and working off that kind of platform. It seems to like spread out throughout the British team. So can you maybe give us a little bit more detail on that, how that has kind of transcended through the team?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with British Swimming, brought in some really good sports psychologists. One in particular called Bill Bessick, who's very, very experienced, and I think has worked a lot with Clemson University over in the States. He worked with Manchester United here in the UK, and they worked a lot on arena skills and what sort of mindset would be required to ensure that you can deliver your best performance when it matters in the final at the Olympic Games. And all the athletes and all the staff were involved in that, so there was very clear direction on this is how we should operate when we're in the arena, and a lot of that's to do with just believing in your own ability, knowing what your specific skill set is individually and maximizing it, and knowing what your weaknesses are and being open to understanding them and knowing how to fix them on a given day. And how you present yourself each day, regardless of how you're feeling, is really important. And there has to be a fearlessness and an excitement around when you go into that type of environment. And you need to always think, remember where you're from, be proud of where you're from, and know that you belong there. And that was one of the biggest things, is that there's a real energy and excitement around getting into the competition and starting to race.
Looking to host your first swim meet or replacing an old timing system? Run a swim meet with ease from your laptop using Superior Swim Timing. You can use Superior Swim Timing with your existing equipment, or they can provide you with a complete timing solution, including deck harnesses, buttons, and starter. SST is fully compatible with High-Tech and Team Unify, as well as Colorado, Daktronics, and Amiga touchpads. Go to superiorswimtiming.com to learn more, and be sure to tell them I sent you.
How have you noticed that a guy like Adam or a guy like Duncan, these guys that are at the top level now, high level performers, how do they deal with setbacks? How do they deal with bad days, rough days? I mean, in terms of being able to, help younger athletes out there, how do the best in the world deal with those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak so much about Adam because I tend to only, see Adam around in the competition. But I always think Duncan was a tennis player when he was younger as well. And he was a pretty good level tennis player. And I always felt that in tennis, you lose a point or you lose a set, you have to forget about it quickly and move on. And we always spoke about that with him in a swimming sense. And if you have one performance that disappoints you, you have to be resilient, and you're not disappointed. It just means that you can be disappointed, rationalize it, and move on quickly. And we've always worked pretty hard on that. So, Duncan will do a lot of racing at competition. At times we'll put in challenges that we might think he's going to fail on, but just to test the ability to deal with that disappointment and move on. And I thought particularly when we got to the Olympics, he did that well, because there was an element of disappointment, understandably, around the 200 freestyle, but there was still more medal opportunities coming up. And what was important was to use it as a little bit of fuel. And one thing we always speak about is that if you do multi-eventing, the important thing is to judge a meet at the very end of it, once everything is said and done, rather than after the first swim. Right. Because anything can happen. And as you go through 6, 7, 8, 9 days of competition, sometimes you do get better, sometimes you hold a good level, sometimes you might just have a performance that doesn't make sense. But if you can evaluate it when all is said and done, then you're not going to let any of those emotions affect you when you go through the meet. And it's just about keeping the wave as flat as possible. If you have a great swim, you got another one coming up. So, it doesn't really matter. If you have a bad swim, you got another one coming up again. So it doesn't matter. It's how you turn it around and how you maximize the next one.
That's a good example. Is that the way you kind of addressed it in Tokyo at the 200 free? He went in as kind of the favorite, lost by just a couple of hundredths of a second, but obviously happy with the silver, disappointed not winning the gold maybe, but you got to move on. You got other races, bigger things coming. So how did you particularly just address that moment in time?
Yeah, well, we had a clear conversation beforehand that, if you do a best time in the final and you get beat, then, there's not a lot you can really do about it at times. And interestingly, when we went to the Commonwealth Games in 2018, the 200 freestyle was the first event. And I think Duncan came third, and it was a pretty poor swim by his standards and a good bit off his best. And he then went on and had a really, really good meet. He won the 100 free, he medaled in the 200 IM, he medaled in the 200 fly, and we got some relay medals. And I just remember after the race just referencing that we'd been here before, that with the same event, we'd been here at the Commonwealth Games. The 200 free didn't go as planned, but you still went on and had a great meet. There's a lot more opportunities coming up, and there's a lot more opportunities actually for Olympic gold medals coming up. So, it's not an easy one, but there were live examples and things that we could recall and bring up of explicit examples of where this has happened, and you'd still performed really, really well.
Yeah, that's good learning there. A little bit more learning here. You've been with him 16 years. He's been with you 16 years. So in terms of maybe just analyzing from the coaching perspective, what can people learn from you in terms of the evolution you've had to make with him as a coach, first of all?
Yeah, I think, well, it's a funny one, because when I started coaching him, I had just started coaching. So I was probably, at that point of not really knowing what I was doing, and not being aware that I didn't know what I was doing. And maybe that naivety at that point worked out really well for both of us. But certainly over time, it goes from quite a directive coaching style to a little bit more of a non-directive coaching style. And somebody explained it to me that now at this point in Duncan's journey, it's more of what they call co-creation with regards to the direction and what we do on a day-to-day basis. And it was about, Duncan went away to private school, and he was a boarder. So for about 5-6 years, he had another coach as well called Elaine, and he had quite limited pool time when he was there. So he didn't train a lot, but he was still very competitive compared to a lot of the guys who at that age were doing a lot more volume and a lot more meters than him. We learned a lot at that point that, for me anyway, that coaching isn't always about directly delivering training sessions, that there's a lot more to it than that, that you can work in the background and pull in other people. We've always never really been afraid to explore different things, to try new things, to bring different people in, to admit when you don't know something and go and ask, or send the athlete in the direction of someone else. Because to me, that is really what coaching is about. And, I think now, I can sit and have really good conversations with Duncan, and not just him, some of the other athletes in the program. And, we actually, they come up with really good ideas about how they can change things going forward and what we could work on. And, sometimes you challenge it back and you say, I think that's wrong, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. But it certainly allows for that longevity, I think, which can be a real strength. And I know the Mel and Adam are the same. And you can always refer back to points in time where we've got stories about. Do you remember when you were 8 years old and this happened, or do you remember when you were 12 and this happened? So there's always good reference points and people that they build relationships with over time, other coaches, practitioners, athletes.
What about in terms of the mentorship for you, the progression? Like you said, you didn't know much in the beginning to now you're one of the best in the world. So in terms of mentorship, people that you've leaned on, people you've learned from in the coaching realm, who have they been for you?
Yeah, I had a lot of, when I first started coaching, people that are probably totally unknown in the swimming world now, but when I started coaching at the local club, there was a coach there called Andrew Buchanan, who was a maths teacher. And the first book he gave me was The Science of Winning by Jan Albrecht. And we chatted a lot about, how much is too much and how effective can periodization be. And now I work really closely with Jan here at Stirling. And from a physiology point of view, it's great to have somebody with that level of expertise. But I always just sought out other coaches and like to learn. And when I started coaching, I think I would get £150 a month and I would just buy swimming books with it. And I would just try and learn a little bit more and read up and, look at what coaches were doing. There wasn't really podcasts back then, to be honest. So there was some swimming videos online.
Some now, mate.
There are plenty now. So actually learning was a little bit more challenging. So I would just go out and about and, I would follow other coaches, obviously Jaco Verhaeren out in Holland and his relationship with Peter and the way they went about things. And, when I started, Michael Phelps was the main man. So a lot of the technical modeling that I did as a young coach was all based around, just observing what he was doing and how Bob Bowman might go about things. And they were the real influences at the time. And for a period here in Stirling, Doug Frost was one of the coaches.
Right.
As Ian Thorpe's old coach. And he was a bit different to me in terms of personality, but he would always take time to speak to you and give you some ideas, and it really opened your eyes to what it really or could take to be one of the best.
Right.
There's lots of different routes to doing it, and that's always what I wanted to kind of see. And even now, that's where the ISL is excellent. You get to meet so many different coaches and athletes from all across the world, and it really brings the swimming community together in person, which is great. You can build relationships with people that ordinarily you wouldn't get to spend time with in your own country. So I really enjoy that element, and just feel that you're always learning about what you're trying to do and yourself, to be fair.
Yeah, I love the ISL for that aspect too, mate. I was only there like 3 or 4 days, and it just seems like everyone has their guard down. Everybody's open. Everybody's willing to kind of go out and chat with each other. It's much more relaxed. Seems to be there's not so much this nation versus nation type mentality. It's more team versus team, which is good. Still there, but everybody's super open and had some great conversations just in the few days that I was there. So I'd imagine after 3 or 4 weeks of hanging out with all these different coaches and athletes around the world, you learn a ton, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even just watching the athletes from the different federations on your team, and seeing how they go about their business and what their mentality is like, and how technical things around how they warm up, what the pre-pool's like, how they manage themselves around the arena. It's really good. And then the athletes are always really open as well. You can have great conversations about why they do certain things. So
yeah, absolutely.
Destro Swim Towers. Gain strength in the water with a tower of power. Save $150 per double swim tower by using code BRETT, B-R-E-T-T, at checkout. DestroMachines.com.
Mate, here's the thing that we've got to figure out. All right, the world record in the 200 free is 142.0. First of all, is that even attainable? Should we be looking at that world record as something we can break in the future? Are we there? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the knowledge? What's your thoughts on this world record, and do you have a plan to get it?
Good question. I mean, it's an incredible world record. But then, there's other world records, I think, in the past that have been broken, arguably to the same extent. If you look at 56.8 on the 100 breaststroke, and even if you look at 426 on the 400 IM for women, and records are always there to be broken. Have we figured it out yet? Maybe not. I'm a big believer, and my philosophy on coaching is that speed is paramount. It's one of the most important aspects, regardless of what distance you swim. And I think that if you're a 47 low 100 freestyler, there is a chance you could get down to 140, 142, 141. Remains to be seen. But I do think it is possible to get down into the 142 marks. I think that the standard of the 200 freestyle at the Olympics in terms of depth compared to the World Championships 2 years before was just astronomical. And there was even a nervousness when you were watching the heats, thinking it might take 145 high to get through here. And then you get to the semi-final and you think it might take 145 low to make it back. And that's talking 3 seconds off that world record. For me personally, I think the best swim is 143.1 in the textile or the normal suit, and probably Phelps from 2007.
Yeah.
And that would be the first target.
Yeah, for sure.
To get back down into those sort of ranges, and it's going to take somebody going out in 49 point and being able to make it comfortable enough.
Well, mate, I guess you're going to need an athlete that's got speed and endurance. I don't know. Do you know anyone like that?
There's a few, to be fair. Now
you got one yourself, mate. Come on, like you got the guy to do it. So there's got to be a game plan here. Like, what are we doing? Like, let us in on some of this. Like, I want to figure out this 143 flat first of all. What are some of the things you're doing in practice that give you hope? Can you give us any particular set that Duncan may have done in the past 12 months or so that kind of gives you some hope?
Yeah, I mean, we're fairly polarized in our approach to training. So we spend quite a lot of time at lower intensity and fairly extensively just working on technical skill or pure speed. And as we get a little bit closer to the competition, that's when we start working on our preparation. And we have specific sets that we've tried, or we do try in those phases. And like I said, we always start from a speed base and try and develop the speed into endurance. So one example, we did what we call an anaerobic power set, and it might have been the preparation leading into the trials in April. And we went 250s. No, we did it the other way around. We went 650s with 10 seconds rest at 200 race pace. You had to try and go 26.5. We did a little bit of a swim down. We went 450s at 100 meter back end pace. So they had to be around about 24 flat with 30 seconds rest. Jeez. A little bit more swim down. And then we did 250s from a dive as fast as you can with no air on 4 minutes. And that was pretty challenging. And we found that actually some of the elements of that were a little bit too hard at that point, but it didn't bother us. He was still really quick. But when we got to the preparation for the Olympics, we made it a little bit shorter. So we went 150 dive with no air, and it was feet leaving long course. I think Duncan went 21.3. Then we went 250s from a push, rest 30. And he was 23.3, then 23.6. And then we went 450s, rest 10. And they were all around about the 25 high mark. So I quite like to make the race pace work very dense. So yeah, for me, if you want to be able to hold an intensity through a race, then you have to be able to do it in training without too much rest. So you can either do short fractions of very little rest or increase the length of the repeats. So one set we do use, but not always, because there is a psychological element to doing the same set over and over and it not being great, is 2 100s. One is dive to feet. You take 10 seconds rest and then you go push to touch. And normally we'll do that 7 days out, and it gives us quite a good idea of what sort of time to expect when we get to the meet.
What's his best at that?
He's best in the front end, feet leaving is 49, and on the back end 51 high, 52 low. So we use that just to really just get used to the pain tolerance on the set. And sometimes what we do is we then add on another 50 right after it, just to really hurt. Or we'll ask him to do the first 100 but overcommit and go out too fast, and then just get used to holding on, just in case in a race something happens and you unintentionally overcommit, or you're a little bit too rested. So there's a lot of speed there, and you just learn how to physically and psychologically deal with that. The high levels of lactate. So we've done that. We stole one from Yako, because I heard it on, I think it might have been your podcasts, if I'm honest. And it was 2 sets of 3 100s on 2 minutes at 100 back end pace. We did it before trials, and the key to it was making sure that each 100 was constructed well. So it wasn't 24.5, 27.0. It was 26.0, 26.0. And I think he averaged about 52 flat long course on that with a suit on. And we did it again before trials. But the key is that the first one's got to be controlled for us anyway. And you try and replicate your third 50 into your back 50. But by the time you get to the third one, that's really, really challenging.
Wow.
So
Good stuff, man. I appreciate you sharing that. I purposely just shut up, just to let you talk, because I want to go back and kind of write some of this stuff out. But in my mind, I'm doing some math here. I'm like, there's not many people in the world that could do this. I mean, I'm thinking 1, 2, maybe 3 people in the world that could pop a set like that on those types of intervals. I mean, you got a special athlete there, mate. That's pretty nice. I did want to mention this. Is, in your mind, is Duncan Scott, is he the best swimmer in the world? I mean, you've got Caleb Dressel. Okay, he's as good as anybody, if not better than everybody. But your guy, mate, he's got speed, he's got range, he's got every stroke. He doesn't have a bad stroke. He's got to be the best swimmer in the world, doesn't he?
I think he's up there. It's hard to determine who the best is, and you could argue it a lot of ways, but he's certainly one of the most rounded swimmers in the world at the minute, and he's very capable on other things that you just don't really get the chance to explore. We always knew that he was really good at medley, and it's probably only this year that's came to the fore. But when he was a junior athlete, that was the events. It was 400 IM and it was 200 IM. And then we went to Rio and he went 48.0. So everybody thought he's a sprint freestyler. And it took us a little while to be able to get the medley events back on the cards at an international level, because it was a little bit more challenging to qualify. So we always worked from a medley and a variety base. And, I just think for longevity and to make training interesting, if you've got the ability to do lots of different exercises, then it's great, because it keeps it interesting. You can use different strokes as a different tool to try and do the same thing at times. So, it certainly makes it, interesting when you're writing sets, because we do have other swimmers who, they're very specific and it's maybe just breaststroke or just backstroke. And it can be a little bit more challenging to make the training sets interesting. But, we can use medley sets as a really good endurance training tool, and fly for the same. Usually make Duncan specifically race a 200 fly maybe 4 weeks out from the meet, just to remind them that the 200 free is a lot shorter and gets over with quicker.
Are you feeling like you're a little stuck in trying to do it all? It's not a criticism by any means. This kid's incredible. He can do it all. But do you then feel like, well, where can we get our wins? Where can we get our goals? Is it difficult to be so good at everything?
Yeah, and I think certainly over the years, it's been trying to identify what is the best event.
Well, we know that. What's the event that stops the world at the Olympics? What is the event?
100 free.
100 free. It's 100 free. So I mean,
yeah.
he's got the speed. He's proven. He's fifth at the Rio Olympics. I mean, is there not this thought in your head of like, why don't we just make him the world's best 100 freestyler?
I think long term there is the possibility to do that. But I still think there's a lot of scope to develop on the 200 free and the 200 IM, plus the relays. I think in the 100 free, looking at the way it's going in some aspects, there's maybe different physicalities that he would require, which could be detrimental to the longer events.
Sure.
You know, and part of the plan is that, you know, I think if Duncan could, he would swim through to 2032. But certainly the next 7 years, there's a bit of a plan as to, you know, sticking with the 200 meter events, and then maybe looking at the possibility of focusing more in on the 100 free on the final kind of stretch. And you know, look at what Brent Hayden's doing at, I think he's 37, 38.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're willing to look after your body and your mind and do things correctly, then you know you can swim until your early 30s and still improve. So we've got plenty of time, and that's the thing we're looking at. Is, you know, this is something about longevity and, you know, going on maybe 4 or 5 Olympics. So we still reckon there's a lot of scope in that 200 medley and 200 free to improve.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I agree. But listen to Paris, right? Paris. Think of Paris. I mean, you got
Just
a good-looking
across the border.
kid. You got a good-looking kid. He's the 100 free champion at the Paris Olympics. I mean, he's a multimillionaire after that. Like he set him up for life, mate.
Yeah, to be fair, it's his decision. So if he comes to me and says that, then that'll be the direction we'll probably discuss. But I know he's got his own goals and ambitions and things he wants to do. So
way, but, no, look, his 200 IM is deadly. You could certainly, you know, have a crack at winning that one in Paris for sure. So in terms of the 2 medley, how's the training for that? What do you do there?
I'd like to introduce our newest sponsor, Swim Angelfish. Swim Angelfish is an online certification program that strengthens your teaching curriculum to serve swimmers of all abilities. Swim Angelfish will prepare you and your instructors with the skills to teach swimmers with autism, physical disabilities, anxiety, sensory and motor conditions, and more. Learn to teach skills faster and with more comfort with Swim Angelfish. Apply for an Only Alpha Pool Product Scholarship and receive up to 50% off your certification. Go to swimangelfish.com today to apply.
I mean, we focus a lot more on speed. It's interesting. His breaststroke was always his weakest stroke on the medley, and we spent a little bit of time. We had Ross Murdoch in the program, right. Craig Benson in the program, brilliant breaststrokers. And we spent a lot of time trying to improve his endurance element of breaststroke and just never really got anywhere. And then we I can't remember why we came onto it, but we looked more at if we could increase his capacity for speed on breaststroke, would that help the improvement? So from 2018 onwards, we spent a lot of time focusing more on how quick can he be at breaststroke. And he's pretty fast. And so we work more on tempo. He doesn't have a very good breaststroke leg kick, and I don't think he's ever broken 40-second short course meters on that exercise. So we knew that he wasn't a glider, but we knew that he had this physical ability to have, you know, a very high heart rate for a long period of time, in which case stroke rate could work really well for him. So we worked more at just looking at his tempo. And he worked on just racing 50-meter long course, 50-meter short course, 25s. And we don't do a lot of slow breaststroke, if any at all. And most of his breaststroke work is just done on speed. So that was one of the things.
Is that the way you broke all the strokes up? Or you just work specifically on the stroke itself at speed, or is there a different approach for the other strokes?
Yeah, well, because fly's the first 50, there's not much of an endurance capacity specifically needed. So again, on fly, it was just, let's just look at how you can be faster. Backstroke's the one where it's difficult to fit in. So we do a lot of the lower level aerobic work on backstroke for a recovery purpose and just for feel. And then we'll probably do a little bit more just upper body stuff, backstroke pull or band only. And then again, looking at the speed element of it. So how fast can you be at your 450s or 4100s? And the more endurance side comes from, you know, we can always trust that the freestyle, regardless of how tired he is at the 150, will be quick. And because you're switching on to a totally different muscle group, you're not as specifically fatigued. Right. So we can always grind out a sub 28.
Sure.
And that's always a challenge. But can you make the first 100 a lot quicker? that's the next challenge. So we might start racing a little bit more on 100 backstroke, or
well, you get the strokes down, a little bit of endurance on your back and your free, a little bit more speed on your fly and breast. What about the combination? Like you said, switching strokes. You know, you go from one body movement to the next, different muscle groups quickly.
Yeah.
And you got to react. Do you do transition work in practice?
Yeah, we use medley work, and specifically for what we term our more aerobic power or aerobic sort of endurance type work. So I'm trying to think. A few sessions. We'll do some quite meaty medley sets, maybe 4.8k, on switching in maybe something like 850s fly, rest 10 seconds, where you have to descend 1 to 4, and then a 400 IM where the fly is negative split. That's always tricky. Then maybe 850s backstroke, then a 400 IM where the backstroke is negative split. 850s breaststroke, then a 400 medley where the breaststroke is negative split, and then 850s free in the same way. So we use those types of exercises to train that switching between the strokes, but that mainly comes in towards the preparation side, and we'll stay off that a little bit when we're in just the general side and the capacity building part.
Right. What about in terms of his strength training, or even just the group strength training and dryland training? Your philosophy on that? How do you integrate that in your group?
We're really fortunate. We've got 3 different specific S&C coaches that work with the athletes, and it's different for everyone. When they come in a bit younger, we tend to focus a little bit more on just strength training, so they might have a higher proportion of frequency with the strength work that they do. Particularly if they're on the bar. As they get older, they might start to do a little bit more just management of themselves. We don't have a lot of injuries, touch wood, although we've had one since the Olympics that wasn't ideal. And they work quite closely with the physio. So physiotherapy and S&C are quite interlinked, because what we find is that the physiotherapists are very good at identifying weaknesses that could cause injury. So if they load too much on a squat, but they've got a weakness in a certain area, then we maybe have to switch the exercise and make it a little bit more basic. But we try and periodize the strength, or we determine which one takes priority. If they're weak and they need to get stronger, then the strength training takes priority over probably the periodization in the pool. If not, then it tends to be the other way around. I mean, I still have a lot of questions on S&C and swimming in particular, really for anything over a 50, and how strong do you need to be to move your body through the water? And if we are doing something in the gym, then it has to relate to a technical improvement in the pool. So you would want to see an increase in distance per stroke, or the ability to hold your stroke count better and stroke length better through a race. Sometimes we don't see that, because putting size on a lot of the time can be detrimental, particularly for some of the longer events.
Right.
So one of the questions I get asked a lot, and this is one that Jan asks me, is if you've got a Formula One car with a Formula One engine, why would you put more weight on it? And it's that bit about trying to make sure that if you are going to get stronger, then it's not just about increasing muscle size.
Right. But you've seen Caleb Dressel up close. He's pretty jacked, pretty ripped.
Yeah.
But seems to manage the muscle well. I get it in terms of the longer events. I'm always thinking sprint, so I'm thinking a little bit more muscle mass. Look, you got a guy that can swim really fast. He's got speed and endurance. In my mind, if we were to slap a little bit of strength on him, I mean, he would just be he'd be freaky good, just crazy good. I want that world record to go in the 100 free. I'm just like, can I find someone who could just take that thing, please?
Yeah, I think that's one of them that everybody's peppering it and knocking on the door, and eventually, right, they're all going to rush through it, aren't they? So, yeah, I think the third fastest time at the Olympics was 47.1.
Right.
And Kolesnikov, I know he didn't do it in the final, but there was 47.0, 47.0, 47.1. It's coming. It is coming.
Yeah, it's coming. You're right. What do you think about these young kids, Popovici, Sunwoo? These young guys seem to have a lot of talent and coming on really well, hey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm massively impressed by both of them, particularly, at the Olympics. And when I was watching the 200 freestyle, it the race was all over the place, but just at the bottom of my eye in lane 1, I could just see Popovici just still there, doing, and kind of doing it all on his own, because he was in lane 1 with nobody really next to him that was going to take the race out at that side of the pool. So, super talents, and people that I think are going to make those events really, really exciting, because you always want a little bit of challenge to the current best to see if it's going to, encourage them or mean that they can improve, or if somebody's going to go past them. So very, very different in terms of their physicality as well, those two in particular. But that's what's great about, sport. It's, a year out, if, we spoke about Popovici being so competitive in the 100 and 200, not sure anybody would have predicted that, where some of the other guys who were competitive with Tom Dean and Kieran Smith, you kind of knew they were on the radar and that they could pose a real threat in that event. Whereas, that the progression of Popovici was so stark that it was really difficult to predict that one.
Yeah.
And I was really excited to see where it goes as well.
Yeah, a lot of good talent, man, coming up for a lot of good racing. There's a lot of good racing these days, which is good for you, I guess. Being isolated a little bit more out in Scotland and not maybe having the same access to real good competition like we do in the US. It's just jam-packed over here. But do you ever feel that isolation? I guess these days it's a little bit better. You got all these people competing with each other, the FINA and ISL, and racing all over the place. But have you ever felt that isolation?
We can compete in Europe really, really easily and really quickly, and we've always used things like the Mare Nostrum Tour as a development tool. But again, sometimes it can be hit and miss. Before the Olympics, because we were really locked down, we could only race against the rest of the UK, but everybody had to go. So the competition level, particularly between the 200 freestyle boys at that point, was excellent. But sometimes you do have to go and seek it out. We've used competitions in the States. I don't think it was Pro Series back then, but it might have been actually about 2014, 15. We've gone out and we've used those. We've sent, as a university, the athletes that don't make the international meet will tend to go and race at the US Open. Again, just because it's probably as competitive as the World Championships at times.
Right.
So we like to go out and seek it, and that's what's been great about the ISL as well. Is just that level of competition is something that's really hard to find in season, if at all. So, you do try and seek it out, and there's lots of different places we can go to do it. But sometimes it's quite powerful to have a competition that's not that quite high a standard, because then you can really start to play around with tactics, techniques, without any real stress of your pride being dented because you're going to get beaten, or you're trying something and you think this isn't really not going to work, but it might work.
Right.
But you can do it. You can do it under the radar. So either in a time trial or in a competition setting. So you just got to try and balance up the level of competition that we seek out.
What ended up happening at World Short Course? He got sick, didn't he?
Well, the last ISL final got a little bit run down just before it, and ideally we probably wouldn't have swam had it not been the ISL final. But just thought, it's for the team. There's still a chance you can do really well. Just go in and give it your best, and just never really recovered. And then, was pretty under the weather by the time we got out to Abu Dhabi, and just thought, right, just come back, because there was a bit of COVID floating around and didn't want to get stuck there. So just knocked the season on the head, but which was unfortunate, because I think early season we really thought that could be a real target. But these things happen, and it was never the priority anyway for the cycle or the season. So
right. Well, where are you guys now? You in the cycle in the season? Where are you right now, and what's coming up?
So we've got our trials for World Championships, Commonwealth Games and Europeans in April in Sheffield. So we've kind of just started our block into that. So we'll do some testing over the next couple of weeks with the group, and then we'll periodise through to the trials. We've got 2 swimmers pre-selected for the World Championships, Kathleen Dawson and Duncan.
Okay.
So they'll just prepare for the World Championships and then Commonwealth Games. So it's a busy year.
Are they pre-selected for Com Games?
yeah, pre-selected for both.
For both. Okay, great.
Yeah, so it means we had a little bit more of a break over Christmas, and COVID was quite bad here. So, you know, we weren't not allowed to train, but there was a lot of people contracting it, meaning that there were close contacts, isolating.
Right.
So we're kind of just getting out of that now, hopefully, but we still just need to be really careful. So, yeah, we're building towards the trials, World Championships, and then Birmingham for Commonwealth Games. And then we'll see what happens. We might give some the option if they want to do Europeans, and they might have a longer break, because I know World Championships in 23, I think, are in November or something. So,
oh wow, really?
It's going to be a bit of a funny year. So we need to just kind of plan for that a little bit.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's going to be a big year this year. A lot of big racing, a lot of stuff on the calendar again. ISL's looking at expanding again, so there's going to be tons of stuff to aim at, tons of stuff to talk about. Stephen, appreciate your time here, mate. Thanks for sharing today.
No worries. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, mate. Take care, eh? We'll catch up for another beer, by the way. I enjoyed the last
one. Yeah, hopefully it can go on longer than 5 o'clock at night.
All right, mate. Take care.
Bye. See ya. Bye.
Event, heat, lane, name of swimmer, times and places. It's called Swimnerd Live, and it allows the data and times from your actual scoreboard to be broadcast and viewed in real time on any smart TV, phone, or other device. There are so many things you can do with this software. A very simple and easy to use necessity for any team or facility that is live streaming their meets results. One click on any device and they're watching your swim meet live in real time. Go to swimpractice.com to learn more.